Welcome everybody to our FFL Professional Educational Series. Today we're discussing turf management in something we've entitled Let's Talk About Grass. Today we're going to have three specialists that I'll introduce, and we'll start out first with Dr. A.J. Lindsey. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Horticulture at the University of Florida. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, his master's degree from the University of Hawaii in Manoa, and his PhD from Iowa State University. His program works with county extension faculty to provide education and product recommendations on turfgrass management systems that improve turfgrass quality while minimizing negative environmental effects. Next is Dr. Adam Dale. He's an assistant professor in the area of turfgrass and ornamental entomology. He's responsible for researching economically important pests of turfgrass and ornamental plants and disseminating the results through management recommendations to extension faculty across the state. His extension program provides research-based information to turf and ornamental producers and manages on how to more effectively and sustainably manage arthropods. And finally, we have Dr. Philip Harman. He's a professor of plant pathology and extension specialist. He received his undergraduate and doctoral degrees from Purdue University. His research interests include diseases of warm season turfgrass species and disease management of southern highbush blueberry. His extension efforts have focused on providing rapid and accurate diagnostic services to the turfgrass, small fruits, and ornamental plant industries. Recommendations given as part of the diagnostic services include practical, research-based disease management solutions. Today, these three amazing folks will be discussing all things turf as we present this month's session entitled Let's Talk About Grass. So turfgrass is one of those topics that I know a lot of people struggle with and a lot of people always have questions about. And so, we thought let's do something where we kind of get all aspects of turf, and we talk about all the areas of turf, not just turf varieties or selection or management, but we wanted to talk about pests as well, so the insects and diseases. And so that's why, we'll start out first with Dr. A.J. Lindsey. And, A.J., I think one of the things that, people struggle with is, what variety to plant and what should I be planting? And so, we look at St. Augustine as the primary turfgrass species in the state of Florida that's planted. And so what are the best varieties and what are the selections of St. Augustine that people should be looking at?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I just wanted to say thanks for having me today. This will be a pleasure to kind of go back and forth and talk about some turfgrass management. But for St. Augustine grass, we have a lot of options here in Florida. It's by far the most commonly used residential grass. And so when we talk about cultivars, we kind of lump them into two different groups, kind of our standards, our tried and true kind of cultivars. And then we have a handful of newer varieties. And then there's pros and cons with kind of all these grasses. There's still some good uses with the standards. But the newer ones are being selected for specific traits, and I'll go over that in a brief moment here. But I will talk about the standard grasses because they are good choices for most of Florida still. So the first one, by and large, is Floratam. Floratam generally has a nice, dark green color. It's really the foundation of the turf grass and residential and sod industries. So with that, it's the easiest one to get access to in terms of sod. And it still remains a good option for most of the state. A few of the downsides of it, it has poor shade tolerance. And so if you do have a shady landscape, there's probably other cultivars that are better. And then it's also susceptible to winter kill or winter injury. And so most of its usage will actually be south of Jacksonville, south of Gainesville, and that types of region. So throughout the state, it's still fairly, a good option for most kind of landscapes. Some of the limitations also are lethal viral necrosis, which Dr. Harman will talk about later. But that's one of the biggest limitations. But by and large, it's still, a good option for most of the state. Another common cultivar is Seville. So Seville, once again, has that nice dark green color. This is a dwarf cultivar. And so if you do want lower mowing heights, you don't really like the tall look of Floratam, this is another good option. And so with that kind of lower growth habit, it also provides good shade tolerance. And so if you do have more shade in your landscape, this is a good option. But you can also see that when we say shade tolerance, that just means it does better in the shade, but they all do well in full sun also. Another standard that we have is Classic. And so this one also has production and use throughout the state. It's actually a combination of a dwarf kind of variety and a standard. So it kind of gives it an intermediate look. This one also has moderate cold and good shade tolerance. And so it's another grass that's kind of used throughout the state and produced throughout the state. Another big one for the state of Florida is palmetto. This one has, once again, production and use throughout the state. It also has very good cold tolerance, so that's another pro for it. And then it also has good shade tolerance. And so if you do have more shade in your landscapes, there are, better cultivars than Floratam. But by and large, Floratam's still a good option for most of the state. So those are kind of the standards. So after that, we kind of have our newer varieties. Some are newer than others. So this first one is Pro Vista. This one was developed by the Scott's Company. It has a few unique traits. So this grass, it's not actually just one grass. It's kind of like a brand. So every year they might be releasing new grasses. And so one year might perform a little bit different than the next year's Pro Vista. So that could be a challenge. But this is actually a genetically modified Floratam. So it's going to have a lot of the same qualities in terms of drought tolerance, disease tolerance as Floratam. But there's two kind of modifications that they did to this plant. So one is they reduced the gene expression that makes it have slower vertical growth. So this one's going to naturally kind of stay lower to the ground in its growth habit, which will reduce mowing. It also improves the shade tolerance. It seems like our dwarf kind of cultivars do better in the shade. And then the other big thing they changed was they made this resistant to glyphosate. And so you can spray glyphosate on this. And so that makes easier weed control. There has been some issues throughout the state where people thought they had Provista. They sprayed glyphosate and they ended up killing their yard because it wasn't Provista. And so I would be cautious before broadcast spraying, maybe do a test area because we have seen that where people thought they had this grass, but ultimately it wasn't this grass. Another new variety is Citra Blue. This one was developed through the University of Florida through Dr. Kenworthy's breeding program with the name Citra Blue. So it was developed in Citra, Florida, and then it has blue because it has this nice dark blue-green color. This one was kind of developed for drought tolerance, and so it has high drought tolerance, and then it also has very good shade tolerance. It appears to be one of our best in terms of shade tolerance. And so if you do have a lot of shade in the environment, this one seems to perform really well. And then so far, it also has good disease response. It seems like it's pretty tolerant to some of the common diseases. But like any grass, there is pros and cons. And some of the issues with this one is winter dormancy issues. And so further northern in the state, you might have more issues in the winter time. And then there's a big issue with thatch. So this one, it is lower growing. It likes to grow more horizontally, but with that, the stones kind of grow over top of each other. And so it makes it have this spongy feel. And so that's kind of one of the major complaints that we see with Citra Blue. Another new grass that's coming to the market is Armada. So this one was actually selected from palmetto. I think there's one sod producer right now that's producing this grass. And so it has similar qualities to palmetto. It will have a dark green color, but it's limited use right now in Florida. This one's kind of ramping up, and we still have a lot more to learn about this grass. The next one is cobalt. So this one seems like a really promising grass. This one's been selected again for drought tolerance. This one was developed through Texas A&M, but within the state of Florida, production just started. So this one will be hard to find right now, but within the next few years, it should be easier to find. Like I said, it was bred for drought tolerance, but it also has good disease and shade tolerance. And so it kind of checks all those boxes. And then it's also very winter hardy, and it has good spring green up. So it seems like it's a really promising grass, but it has limited use so far in Florida, so we might have more issues moving forward. And then the last kind of new St. Augustine grass is called Sola. There's actually no production in the state of Florida yet, but I think that will change moving forward. It has good winter hardiness again, so our winter months it's going to retain more of that green color, good shade tolerance, and then it's also very aggressive. And so if you do have more use on your St. Augustine grass, this one will recover from that damage quicker. So that might be another good use for this grass. So that's kind of our standard varieties versus our newer ones. Like I said, there's always pros and cons, and so it's really trying to tailor what grass you're going to select for your landscape.
Well, thank you, AJ. That's really great information. And what can you tell us about zoysia grass and zoysia grass selections? What to consider?
Yep. So it's similar to St. Augustine. We have quite a few cultivars available to us in Florida. Once again, we do have, the standard cultivars, and then we have some newer ones coming into the market. The first one is Empire zoysia grass. So this is, the standard coarse textured grass throughout the state of Florida for zoysia. When I say coarse textured, I mean it has a wider leaf blade. So that's what we mean when we say coarse textured. It has moderate shade tolerance, but this is the most widespread zoysia grass that's used in residential areas. The next grass is Icon zoysia. So once again, coarse textured zoysia grass. This one has exceptional salt tolerance, and so if you're more coastal, this might be a good option. The downside of it, though, it does have poor shade tolerance. So this one is going to prefer more sun, less shade in your landscapes, but it does have, good salt tolerance. So that could be a good use area for this one. The next one is Palisades zoysia grass. So this one again is available in Florida. It has good drought tolerance, and then it has the moderate shade tolerance. So you'll see with a lot of these grasses with zoysia grass, they'll have moderate to good shade tolerance. And so there is multiple options if you do have some shade in your landscape. In terms of a newer zoysia grass, there's actually one that was developed from Dr. Kenworthy again with the University of Florida. It's called Brazos. I think I'm pronouncing it that right. It's named, I think, for a river in Texas, where Dr. Kenworthy's from. This one has a medium texture, so it's not as coarse as the last few that I talked about. But it seems like this one's going to be adaptable to most of the state of Florida. It has excellent drought tolerance, excellent salt tolerance. It has good shade tolerance, so better than a few of the other ones I just talked about. But it also has very good winter color retention and spring green up. And so, earlier in the season, some of the complaints with zoysia grass is that they kind of remain brown the longest out of the grasses we use. But this one seems to green up faster than the other ones. So that's kind of our coarse to medium textured zoysia grasses. If we get into the fine textured, so these aren't going to be used everywhere. It's more, high-end landscapes. They're a little bit more maintenance, more mowing. But our dominant fine textured zoysia grass is actually Zeon. So Zeon zoysia grass with all of our kind of fine textured zoysia grasses, they all have good shade tolerance. But one of the downsides of this one is that it has poor winter color. And so it's going to go brown over the winter when it goes dormant. In terms of newer kind of fine textured zoysia grasses, there's two of them that are coming to the market. They're not widely available yet. It's limited in production, so it's going to be hard to find for a while they ramp up production. But the two are Lobo and Stadium. And so both of them have a good dark green color, both fine leaf blades. They have very good shade tolerance, and then they have an improved winter color. So compared to Xeon, these ones in the winter are going to retain that green color longer in the season. Another newer variety, this one's been out for, I think, a couple years now, and production's ramping up, is Citrusoi. So this one has a medium to fine texture. So it's kind of a in between the fine and the coarse. And so it gives you more of the look of the fine textured, but it gives you the maintenance of the coarse textured grasses. And so it's kind of a hybrid. It has good winter color and good spring green up. And it also has good shade tolerance. So I installed this outside my office, and over 2 years, I really haven't had any issues with it. So it seems like it's a really promising grass, but I'm sure we'll learn more as it gets more spread use throughout the state of Florida. So that's kind of the main ones in terms of what's available for zoysia grasses in Florida.
Wow, AJ, that there's so much to choose from, and there's more. I learned a lot. Actually, there's more varieties that I wasn't familiar with. So thank you so much for covering all that. But let's talk a little bit about fertilizer. How can we want to make sure that we're doing the best for the turf as well as for the environment. So give us some thoughts on how to maintain this turf.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it kind of goes to the 4 R's of nutrient management. Like any other system, cropping system, we have a turf grass system. You could think of it as a perennial crop, but we really want to be focused on the right source, the right rate, the right time of year. That way, we're not wasting nutrients or they're being lost to the environment, and then in the right place. So the right source is kind of dictated by a soil test. So the soil test will tell you if you're deficient in, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur. And so if we are deficient, then we'd want a fertilizer that includes those. But if we're not deficient, then we're more focused on the nitrogen. In terms of the right rate, sometimes these rates are dictated by ordinances or the urban turf rule. But for turf fertility in general, per application, we're looking at a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet is a kind of our standard rate. And then if you have a product that has a high percentage of slow release, you can go up to 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. But generally, we really want to stay around that 1 pound of nitrogen. So that's kind of the rate that we go with. And then the right time of year, we want to apply these nutrients while the grass is growing. Sometimes we have some limitations with that with fertilizer ordinances. And so it is important to know your county, know what ordinance you have. Do you have a fertilizer blackout? Through that, you can go through the FFL website and find the fertilizer ordinance app. You can click your county and learn all about, when you can apply your fertilizers. But if we don't have a ban, South Florida, so we have three kind of distinct zones in Florida. We have South Florida, Central Florida, and North Florida. South Florida can be applied year round. Central Florida, we're looking early April to start of October is kind of baseline. And then North Florida, we're looking at mid-April to kind of mid to end September is kind of the right time. Then the right place is kind of obvious. You want to apply it to the turf grass and then avoid any kind of hardscapes. And then to go with the right rate, so we have per application, but we also need to know how much yearly totals we can put on the different grasses. And so with that, we have IFAS recommendations. for every grass. And so you can look these up online, but the way it works is you find what grass you have, you find kind of what zone you are in Florida, and then there'll be a range of yearly nitrogen application. So if we just take an example, we're looking at St. Augustine in Central Florida, it's anywhere from 2 to 5 pounds of nitrogen per year. But we'd want to split that up into multiple applications with that 1 pound of nitrogen. So you can look up all these. I do want to point out that some of the recommendations have been changed recently. So you might want to get an updated table. The main one is Bahia grass. The upper limit on terms of nitrogen per year is actually decreased across the state of Florida. So that's important to note that some of these will change over time, and so you do want to get up to date tables on our recommendations. So that's kind of the generalized kind of rules of fertility in turf grass.
All right, that's really informative, AJ, and this chart is great. What can you tell us about irrigating turfgrass?
Yeah, so same kind of thing with, as fertilizer, there are some, best management practices with irrigation. Mainly, the biggest point that we want to get across is that if you have an established landscape, we want to only irrigate as needed. One of the major issues we kind of see across the state is overwatering. And so during our rainy season, people won't change their irrigation schedules. And so this kind of leads to some root rots and disease issues. Turf grass will be thinning. And so with that, we only want to apply irrigation as needed. So when it's showing signs of drought stress. And then we also want to apply between a 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch of water per irrigation event. And so to do that, we really have to calibrate our own irrigation system. And so everybody's system will be different, and you actually need to do a catch can test. So that's where you put cans, or you can buy actual kind of materials for this, but you can just use any kind of can, like a cat food can, tuna can. You place these all over your yard, you run your irrigation for a set amount of time, and then you measure how much water was put out. And then from there, you can adjust your time to get to that 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of irrigation per event. The other kind of generalized things is check your irrigation system, make sure the heads are all working, they're spraying in the right areas. Check to see if your rain shutoff sensor is actually working or not. They seem to fail fairly quickly, so you might need that replaced. And then just make sure there's no plants in the way. So sometimes landscape plants will be small when they get established. Then they grow taller, they get in the way of the irrigation. You'll actually have some kind of dead zones where it's not receiving any water. So that's kind of the main best management practices in terms of irrigation.
Fantastic. Thanks, AJ. What are some of the other issues and things that you think the industry and just people in general ought to know about maintaining their turf grass?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So a lot of it is, proper water, but proper nutrition. And so we are trying to change the mindset from just fertilizer, and that's our only kind of nutrient input, into a more holistic approach. So we're trying to figure in what's in the soil already. Are we using reclaimed water? Which nutrients are in that reclaimed water? How much organic matter's in the soil? This will all hopefully alter our nutrition or how much fertilizer we're actually putting into this system. So we're trying to change the mindset from, this is just our fertility fertilizer recommendations and, put more factors into that so we're using it more efficiently. Another thing that we're trying to look into, or I think has a big impact on management, is actually the soil itself, so soil health. We're learning more about the importance of soil. There's a lot of ecosystem functions that we can get out of a healthier soil. But directly in terms of turf grass management, the soil can actually affect nutrient cycling, water holding. And so it can alter our management in terms of how often we need to irrigate, how many nutrients we need to put into this system. So once again, trying to look at that holistic approach. And then the kind of last thing is we're trying to factor in landscape age and how that will actually affect management. And so we have the brand new landscapes. It's builder sand or fill sand. It's almost inert material. And if you contrast that to an established landscape, if it's been there for 20, 30 years, the soils are building up, they're building up organic matter. And so this should alter our management. The new builds are going to require more water, more nutrients. And so hopefully over time, we can kind of scale those back and further reduce kind of our inputs into this system. So that's kind of the main issues I think that we're working on as a state right now in terms of turfgrass management.
Fantastic. And, anything about, any best management practices for mowing?
Yeah, so I think there's some misconceptions or um, we don't always see this being done in the industry, but is knowing the correct mowing heights. And so we have tables or kind of ranges online. You could look up what grass you have, what's our recommendations. But the thing we see most often is, or what I see most often is grasses being maintained at a lower height of cut than what they should have. And so let's just say we're looking at Bahia grass. It should be mowed anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. You see people mowing at an inch and a half, 2 inches because they just kind of want to fly by, mow it down so they don't have to come back. But this will actually change how that turf performance is. And so if you're at the right height of cut, it's going to be denser grass, more healthy. It's going to resist weeds. But if you're stressing the grass out by mowing it too low, you're actually going to scalp the grass. It's going to thin out over time. Weeds will become an issue. And so actually knowing the correct mowing height is a bigger factor than what we typically think of.
Great. And how often should turf be mowed?
That'll be based off the time of year mainly. So in the winter months, you can probably get away with less mowing or less frequent. So I think this last year in Gainesville, I actually had a time where I don't think I mowed the grass for about a month. So it's really based off how fast it's growing. But this time of year, we're typically looking at that every week you're going to be mowing your turf.
All right. AJ, thank you so very much. This has been really helpful. It kind of gives people a starting off place as to where to go on selecting their turf and how to care for it. And we'll invite you back later on to answer some questions. And with that, I'd like to invite Adam Dale to um, take some questions next. And Adam, heard a lot about St. Augustine's out there, and you're an entomologist, and so what are the primary insect pests of St. Augustine grass?
Yeah, so insects are kind of ubiquitous in turfgrass systems. So I'm sure most people are familiar with finding bugs in their yards or in their lawns. In St. Augustine grasses, I would say St. Augustine grass is going to be susceptible to most of the different turfgrass pests that people are familiar with, but there are some key culprits that we can just anticipate running into. Um, so the primary ones we're going to see in St. Augustine grass are going to be your sod webworms and your southern chinch bugs. We'll run into some other common insects like fall armyworms and occasionally mole crickets. But we'll talk about those a little later. And for St. Augustine grass, I think our two primary culprits are going to be sod webworms and southern chinch bugs.
Yeah, and time of year.
Yeah, so time of year is going to really be a major determinant of when you're going to see different pests and where you're at in the state. So if you're in North Florida, really from November until about this time of year, maybe November to March, April, you aren't going to really see a lot of insect pest activity. But if you're in South Florida, that window of inactivity is going to be much shorter. Um, and then it's also very dependent on the weather. So, and that kind of goes hand in hand with time of year. But our rainy season and dry seasons kind of dictate which pests we're going to run into. So, for example, some insects that really like the wet time of year are going to be things like sod webworms, things like spittle bugs, uh, and then other things like a little more drought stress, like chinch bugs. So there will be these triggers that kind of trigger insect problems.
Terrific. We're seeing some images now on the screen of some of those pests that you're talking about.
Yeah, so right here, these are sod webworms. So this specific species is tropical sod webworm. Depending on where you're at in the state, you may see a different moth associated with this, but the caterpillar is going to look the same and it's going to behave very similarly. Um, I saw someone had a comment earlier about sod webworms, and these are really going to be something you see during the rainy season, um, maybe June into the fall. And these are chewing pests. So they basically mow down your grass to the stolons, to the soil surface. Like this image here on the top right, that lawn has been chewed all the way down, and it looks like something came through and scalped your lawn, but it was just a bunch of caterpillars. Uh, the other image here on the far right is going to be what you want to see if you want to anticipate caterpillar activity. So that's early stage feeding from a caterpillar. A newborn baby caterpillar is too small to chew through the leaf, so it scrapes the surface off of the leaf. Um, so that's early stage, and then they start chewing through the whole lawn. But this caterpillar you see on the left, that's going to be the culprit. And right next to it, you see a bunch of bright green poop. And that is going to be another really good indicator that you have sod webworm activity. So dig around in the grass. If you find a pile of little tiny bright green poop pellets, that's going to tell you you've got sod webworms.
So how do we deal with chinch bugs?
Yeah, so chinch bugs are the one that everybody is most familiar with. This is the number one insect pest of turf grasses in Florida. Um, so chinch bugs are kind of a beast to deal with. They have sap-feeding mouth parts. So you see this image on the bottom left. That's a chinch bug from the side, and you see it's got its mouth part tucked up under its body. So when it's feeding on turf grass, it extends that mouth part, taps into the stem, and starts feeding on sap. Uh, these insects go through multiple cycles of generations in the same lawn. So if you find an infestation, you're going to find the little baby nymphs like you see on the left. You're going to find the adults like you see on the right, all mixed in. And these really thrive in periods of drought followed by periods of rain. So when we go through these really hot, dry spells followed by intense rainfall, that's when we start to see these triggers. So really like this time of year right now where we're starting to get some storms coming through, I expect to start seeing more chinch bug problems. And part of the reason for that, so when we think about chinch bugs, we think about drought stress and chinch bug outbreaks. Um, but part of the reason for that is they are tapped into that vascular system and they're not actually sucking out of that plant. It's like poking a straw onto a pressurized irrigation pipe. And so they poke the straw in and then let the sap flow. And so if that plant's really drought stressed, there's not a lot of sap flow. But once it gets rehydrated, that's when they're going to be happy. If you go to the next slide, there's a few more details about management. So one thing, a misconception that most people seem to not be aware of. So these are a big pest of St. Augustine grass, but they also will attack zoysia grass. So don't get stuck in the mindset that if you have zoysia, chinch bugs aren't something to be looking out for. When you do get damage, it spreads really quickly. Or when you get a population, that population will build up really quickly. So you've got to have eyeballs on the plants frequently during the time of year when it's warm and we're getting some hot and dry spells. If you don't, so you don't look at the plants for a couple weeks, then you could come out and have some serious damage that requires some pretty immediate action. And then turfgrass management is really the key to any pest management, but chinch bugs are really in tune with the plants and they take advantage of opportunities like water stress, like nitrogen inputs, too much thatch. So if you have those cultural practices kind of out of whack, chinch bugs will take advantage of that. And then the last thing is insecticides. So the approach to managing chinch bugs is traditionally insecticides, but we know that chinch bugs develop resistance to insecticides. There's multiple cases in Florida. So it's really critical that the same chemical classes are not being applied to the same lawn again and again and again, because then that product's not going to work anymore.
Thanks, Dr. Dale. So you mentioned that chinch bugs attack zoysia grass. What are some other of the main pests that you see in zoysia grass?
So we see some of the same culprits like sod webworms and fall armyworms and chinch bugs, but some of the kind of unique pests that we see mostly in zoysia grass are hunting billbugs, which is the one over here on the left, and Tuttle mealybug, which is a little mealybug. So hunting billbugs are beetles. They're weevils, so they have these long snouts on the end of their head. And they're chewing insects, so they will feed on plant tissue and defoliate it, or feed on the roots. So as a larva, this little white grub here in the middle, they don't have any legs and they're pretty small. So the adult lays an egg in the grass. The egg hatches, turns into a larva that bores into the stem of the grass, feeds in the stem, hollows it out. Once it gets too big to fit into the stem, it will leave and go down into the soil where it feeds on the roots. Feeds on the roots for a little while, pupates in the soil, and then comes out as an adult, and the adult feeds on the turf canopy. But they're nocturnal, so you don't see them unless you're out there digging around with a headlamp. And so their damage is going to show up like what we see here on the right, and it really shows up mostly in the fall once the turf starts to slow down and it can't really keep up with that damage. So looking for these insects is really important. And so there's a few really critical ways to track these. So if you see some like patchy dieback in a zoysia grass area, you can tug on the canopy. If it breaks in half, it's been hollowed out by the larva. You can dig up a few areas to see if you find these little larvae in the soil and in the roots. And you can put little cups in the turf to see if you can capture some of these adults as they're walking around at night. They'll fall into the cup, can't get out. And those are all really important ways to really determine if you have bill bugs, because diagnosing these things is really important so you aren't spinning your wheels and wasting time and money.
Fantastic. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, you go ahead, Tom. I was just going to talk about the next pest.
No, go for it. I'll catch up to you in a bit.
So the other primary thing we see in zoysia grass, which has been causing a lot of issues around the state over the past few years, is Tuttle mealybug. So this thing's present throughout the state. It seems to really be concentrated in the villages. So if you live in the villages, I'm sorry. But that seems to be where like we just repeatedly see it. But if you have a zoysia grass lawn or you're working in a zoysia grass lawn anywhere in Florida, this is an insect that you've got to be looking for. And no matter where I see it in the state, the damage looks exactly like what you see in these photos, where you have this kind of grayish, brownish dieback within the canopy. And if you look closely at those leaves, you'll see this white waxy residue on the leaf, and then these little pink mealy bugs tucked down on the leaf surface and down in the stem. And so these are really sneaky because you're not going to typically be looking for mealybugs in your grass, but that allows them to really build up populations and then cause damage. And that is when you get in trouble. And we can talk about management of these a little more in a couple minutes.
All right. Well, what about Bahia? People still have Bahia grass out there. What pests do we have to worry about with Bahia?
So yeah, so Bahia grass is one of the I mean it's a very hardy turf species, has relatively few insect problems compared to some of our others. Um, Fall armyworms are kind of the one insect that'll feed on any turf grass and is an occasional problem. But mole crickets are probably our biggest issue in Bahia grass. Um, and mole crickets are my favorite turf grass pest. They're really cool organisms. But these things are tunneling in the ground, they're uprooting plant material, and they attract a lot of things that likes to dig around in the soil and create quite the mess. So this tunneling up here on the right is a good example of that tunneling activity from these adult mole crickets digging around. Um, the best way to diagnose this and determine if you have mole cricket activity is by doing a soapy water flush. So like what this little video is showing, pour some dish detergent mixed with water, about a gallon or so, in a 1 by 1 square foot area, and wherever you see these tunnels. And if there's a mole cricket in there, it'll come up to the surface, and that'll tell you if you have them, how many you have, and what life stage they're in. That's really the way to find them.
That's very effective, it looks like. So what can you tell us? What about new pests that we should be on the lookout for, Dr. Gale?
So in Florida, we've always got new pests. There's always new things coming in and causing issues. I would say, fortunately, in the turf world, we haven't seen a lot of new recent invaders over the past couple of years. But the total mealybug is definitely the one to be looking out for because it's not the mainstay pest that everybody thinks of and everybody manages for. Um, it's not on any of the insecticide labels. It's not something that's marketed for, any products are marketed for. So this is the one to look for. And these are little mealybugs like you'd see on an ornamental plant. Um, so the best thing to do for these is really preventive integrated pest management. You got to manage the plants so the plants are happy and you don't have a conducive habitat for the mealybugs. Um, it has turned out that thatch management is the most important factor for mealybug management. And so if you are actively managing the thatch in a zoysia lawn, that's going to reduce likelihood of mealybug infestation. And if you have mealybugs, managing the thatch is a critical component of getting control of those mealybugs. And then the hardest thing is patience. Once you have a lawn that looks like some of those photos that we just showed you, it's going to take several weeks for that lawn to recover. So you can kill the mealybugs, wipe them out, but that turf's going to look the same for many weeks after that because the mealybugs caused the damage, but the plant now has to recover from that damage. Dead mealybugs doesn't immediately equate to healthy plants. So patience and some TLC for the turf. But if you have an infestation, really systemic insecticides are an essential piece of the puzzle. Otherwise, you aren't going to get control of them.
Great. How can we reduce pest pressure on our turf grasses? What can we do to preventively, and be proactive with pest issues?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I think are worth driving home. So one is diagnostics, and I think Dr. Harman will really drive that point home in a minute. But please use the diagnostic resources that are available from IFAS throughout the state. Knowing your problem is really essential for effectively managing it. So that's number one. Number two is remember that most things that are living in your lawn are not pests, even the plant feeding organisms. So 100% of plant pests are plant feeding insects, but 99% of those are not plant pests. And these things become pests in response to some disturbance. So it's plant stress triggering an outbreak. It's poor habitat or over reliance on insecticide use that's reducing biological control, or it's some factor that is contributing to these insects finding and thriving in your lawn. For example, having a large monoculture planting of turf is going to be a big beacon for insect pests. And without that, I mean, that's always going to attract pests and be prone to pest outbreaks. The other thing that I want everybody to remember is that the turfgrass systems are a web of living interactions. Lawns are plants, they're not carpets, they're not outdoor carpets. I think a lot of times we think about them as something we can just plop down and make a lawn, but we've got to have the right plant, right place principle for turfgrass also. So turf isn't going to thrive in every situation, and if it's not, then it's going to have issues. So remember, they're living organisms. And effective management requires managing the system, not just one piece of it. So integrated pest management is really essential. Those are my soapbox.
Fantastic. And, you know, there's obviously publications that people can get more information on. Where do they find?
Yes, so we're trying to make as much information readily available as we can to help people diagnose issues and figure out ways to manage them. So this is my lab's website, my email, and where you can find me on different social media. So please reach out if I can help.
Dr. Dale, thank you so much. I feel like I learned quite a bit, and I see a lot of questions in the Q&A box. We'll get to those in just a little bit, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Harman now, talking a little bit about the pathology of our turf grass. And I'll start first with, you know, I know something that you're passionate about is, you know, how do we know if we have a problem, and how do we determine if we have a problem?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today about turfgrass diseases. And, you know, a lot of times I get calls from homeowners and it'll start something like, hey, Doc, my lawn died. What do I spray? And, you know, that's a tough question to answer without, knowing what the problem is that causes that lawn to look bad. So when good turf goes bad, the first thing that we really need to do is figure out why. And most of the time, when turf suffers and the aesthetic quality goes down, it's not disease. When it is disease, we have some really good options for managing those diseases that we can employ. But there are so many other reasons why turf can go into decline that we have to rule out first. Otherwise, we're wasting our efforts and our inputs to do that. And so the way that we do that is through diagnostics. And diagnostics means to take a sick plant, send it into a lab, and determine what pathogens are present, if the pathogens are known to cause the symptom that we're seeing in the landscape, in the turf, and is that pathogen specific to the turf plant that we're growing. Not all pathogens that are fungi affect all plants. They're specific to different hosts. And so knowing what's present is the first problem that we have to solve in order to get a prognosis. And prognosis means what's likely to occur in our situation with our particular problem. So a prognosis will tell us what the likely outcome is and then dictate what is the most appropriate resource for us to expend, what is our course of action to take to deal with it. So even in the later stages, if we know the lawn has failed and we're going to have to renovate, it's important for us to know why the lawn died in the first place in order for us to correct the problem moving forward with the new sod or trying to grow the turf back. So in order to get a good diagnosis, we need to send a sample to a lab. Even as a pathologist that's done this for the last 20 years, I can't walk out into a lawn and say with certainty which disease or if disease is the main problem that we're seeing. So we have to send our sample into a lawn. And, symptoms can be deceiving. Sometimes those symptoms that we see look really bad are going to be gone in a week, and we don't need to spray anything at all. We don't need to take action other than just be patient. In other cases, they're the beginning of what's likely to be something that's going to ruin the whole lawn and something that we, at the early stages, have more options to deal with and control than we do in the later stages of the problem. So what resources do we have here in the state of Florida for sending a turf sample off for diagnostic processing for a diagnostic sample? And there are several. The one in Gainesville is the one that I'm stationed at. We have the Rapid Turf Diagnostic Service that's specific to turf, and turf managers who are likely to use a pesticide to try to control disease has a rapid turnaround time. But any of our clinics around the state have the ability and the potential to do a turf diagnostic sample. So starting up in Quincy at NEFREC, we have a lab. MREC and Apopka does limited diagnostic services. Gulf Coast Research and Education Centers in Baum, and all the way down to Trek and Homestead. Dr. Romina Gazis does a great job with turf there as well. For palms, we have the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center with Brom Dillon to do fungal disease, and others there work on phytoplasmas. So there are a lot of labs around the state. Gainesville is sort of the hub lab for these particular diagnostic services. And as part of that, our Plant Diagnostic Center in Gainesville is part of the National Plant Diagnostic Network. And so in addition to the resources we have here in Florida, we're connected into a larger network of labs where we provide resources to those labs around the country, and we have those resources available to us. Here in Florida, if something new comes up, if we have a surge in number of samples we need to process, that we can reach out to. It also means that our diagnosticians in our labs have been trained to a certain level of proficiency in diagnostics called the STAR-D accreditation. And so we do a good job of doing diagnostic services, which means we can tell you what pathogens are present, what diseases are occurring, and then couple that diagnostic advice with research-based management options. And so these are critical first steps for us to identify what the problem might be, what are some of the research-based options we have for managing those diseases hopefully early in the cycle of the disease and the damage, and then employ those as they're appropriate for our particular situation. It generally takes about 2 to 7 days for us to process a sample. It takes 2 days on the rapid turf side because we employ additional media. We charge more for that because we use those additional media and additional resources to try to get to the bottom of it quicker. That would be a service that we'd want to use if we're managing a turf where our aesthetic has to be at a certain level, and we have a low tolerance for poor aesthetic. If we're going to use a pesticide in the next 3 to 5 days, send a sample to the Rapid Turf Diagnostic Service, and that can help us to have a rapid answer for whether it's disease and which of those pesticides we can select to get the most efficient and effective management possible from our investment in time, in money for that particular problem.
Well, thank you very much. What do you see as the main disease issues of St. Augustine grass?
Yeah, so we get a lot of samples of St. Augustine grass. It is our predominant long grass in Florida. Here in the Plant Diagnostic Center in Gainesville, our number one diagnosis on St. Augustine grass is take-all root rot. On the slide, I've got some data for the last year from October 22 to October 23. And take-all root rot is there at the top of the list as far as the diseases that we see. Take-all root rot is a fungal disease we can talk a little bit more about later. It's a common disease that we see that occurs underground, rots the roots, so it's difficult to diagnose on your own just looking at the upper parts of the sample. And so it's one of the things that we get that the company's turf that's struggling, that's declining, it's thinning, that we have some management options for. Going down the list and other things we can talk about today, you see SCMV as our number 2 diagnosis for the last year or so, and that stands for sugarcane mosaic virus. That's a virus that is relatively new to the scene of turfgrass disease as far as the diseases of concern in the state of Florida. For the last 10 years or so, sugarcane mosaic virus has caused a severe symptom called lethal viral necrosis on our most common variety of St. Augustine grass that we grow in the state of Florida, Floritam. And so that one has raised major concerns where it occurs. It requires that some renovation occur to correct the problem and prevent additional losses of turf. And so those 2 are at the top. Gray leaf spot is another fungal disease we see in shade. It's one we have some good cultural management options for, and that we can manage by altering the environment a little bit, as well as fungicide options that are available. We don't identify bugs and insects and arthropod pests in the plant disease clinic per se, but when we see chinch bugs run across the table, as soon as we open up that sample, we will report that back to you and say, you really may want to do a little bit of investigation as to whether these chinch bugs are spread throughout this lawn and may be related to the problem you're seeing. Same thing goes for mealy bugs. We don't characterize those mealy bugs to species, but if we get a zoysia sample in that has obvious mealy bug infestation, we'll let you know that and refer you to Dr. Dale's resources or the Plant Insect ID lab resources to get further information there. And then large patch has been a real persistent issue for us on St. Augustine grass over the last few years. We have some really good fungicide options for where this disease occurs that we can talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But the last one I wanted to talk about there is no pathogen found. And you'll see that's in the top 10 of the diagnoses that we give out. And what this means is not that there's not a problem with this lawn. It means that we couldn't find a disease cause for that particular problem that's on the sample that was submitted to us. Sometimes that can be frustrating for our clientele. Well, it's not a disease. What do I do? They can limit and inform us that if it's not disease, we don't want to go out and spray a fungicide on that particular area. It's not going to help. It's going to be extra costs that are associated. And so it is a good diagnosis to receive. It means focus on insect pests, focus on the horticultural inputs, and really focus your areas outside disease. What's causing the problem does not appear to be disease, and that's a good answer to get sometimes, even though it doesn't necessarily identify the problem for us. And there are lots of other diseases there on that list that we see from time to time and occasional problems. And there are many, many more that can occur in Florida on turfgrass throughout the year.
Dr. Harman, would you like to talk about how you can manage large patch disease?
Sure, we can we talk about large patch disease. So large patch is a fungal disease that occurs in the mild temperature periods of the year. That occurs on St. Augustine grass. You saw it in the list there of common diagnoses. We don't get a lot of samples of large patch compared to take all root rot because it's fairly obvious when it occurs what it is. It's a very large area of blighted turf. Generally has, and you can kind of see in this picture, I hope, an orange to yellow border when it's active, and it can be very dramatic in the types of symptoms that it can cause. So in the picture that's being shown, you see one of my neighbor's lawns that has large patch disease, very dramatic looking symptom, blighted turf. No fungicide was applied. The lawn recovered the next year. And so the first thing to state about large patches, typically when we're talking about St. Augustine grass, it's not going to kill the grass. It does make it look bad from about October here in Gainesville through to the spring period of April or May. So there's a big chunk of the year when this disease can be active. There are some good fungicides that we can use to control it. But the first thing to do is to know whether or not it's large patch or something else. And so what we like to say is do the tug test of this turf in this blighted area, go to the edge of the grass, grab a handful of it loosely and give it a little pull. If the roots come up with the stolons attached, that's not large patch. That's more likely take all root rot. What you're seeing in the picture are shoots that are rotted at the base where they connect to the stem of the turfgrass that have separated easily. If you take those individual leaf blades and pull them, they separate very easily from the shoot of the plant, from the individual turf plant that you're seeing in the picture. And that's indication that you have a rot at the base of that on the leaf sheaths. That's very diagnostic for large patch disease caused by Rhizoctonia solani. So first step in managing large patch is know that it has occurred and what it is, either through a diagnostic sample or by using a diagnostic service by looking yourself for diagnostic symptoms in the field. If we look at what our options are, we have some really good fungicides for managing large patch. And where it makes sense to use these fungicides are where we have the disease present. It will occur typically in the same places each year, given the same environmental conditions. We'll talk about specifically soil temperatures and when they indicate to use these products a little bit later. But let's look specifically at large patch fungicides that can control the disease. The previous slide that flashed there for a little bit showed some fungicide evaluation trial on the left there in the little black lines that I drew in. You can see where no fungicide was applied. This is done in a shade structure down at our Citra research facility where we're altering the environment not to try to prevent disease, but to try to cause disease, try to promote disease so that we can evaluate fungicide products for use in our home landscapes and commercial turf areas. So in the green areas to the right of the big patch, you'll see healthy turf. This was given the same environment. It was inoculated with the fungus, but when we used the fungicide, we were able to prevent the disease from ever occurring in that spot. And these fungicides weren't applied after the disease had already started. They were applied before, preventively. And that's key when managing turfgrass disease. As Adam talked about earlier, once you have some damage occurring, it takes weeks for that turf to recover. We don't want to preventively apply fungicides over the entire lawn every year when we don't know for sure if disease is going to occur. But for large patch specifically, when we know the conditions have been right in the past, the disease has occurred, we can use a minimal amount of fungicide to do an excellent job of preventing damage like is seen in this picture. So again, Floratam turf will recover, but we have some options that we can use to prevent that damage from occurring in the first place. And when we look at specific fungicides, in my research, I've evaluated many fungicides over the years for large patch prevention. And a lot of times the question that I get from homeowners is, well, what can I spray? What can I find at the Home Depot, the Lowe's, the Garden Center to treat large patch, to prevent large patch? Are there any options out there? And the answer is yes, there are options available. In fact, some of the products that are on the market and marketed to homeowners have some of the same active ingredients that we use in our professional products. It's important, though, for us to look at the rates, follow the label instructions. And when we do that and compare the homeowner available products to some of the commercial products, what we find is that there's not always the cost savings to doing it yourself that you might expect, particularly when we buy these homeowner marketed products. So as an example here on the slide, I've got some fungicides. This is the Bio Advanced fungicide, used to be Bayer Advanced. This is a fungicide that contains propiconazole. It's labeled at 6.4 fluid ounces per 1,000 square feet as a maximum use rate. And it has the same active ingredient as the professional product Banner Max, which is labeled at 4 fluid ounces per 1,000 square feet. When we look at these quantities, there's more of that product, Bio Advanced, going out, but there's more propiconazole being delivered from the professional product. In fact, 3.7 times more propiconazole active ingredient is in that same smaller amount of Banner Max than in the fungus control for lawns. What does that mean? Well, there is a certain point where we can apply too much of a product, but there is a minimum effective dose that we need to deliver to our turf to prevent disease. And that minimum effective dose is the Banner Max low label rate that's presented here. So if we use the fungus control for lawns, we have to use more of it. In fact, we have to use 3.7 times as much per 1,000 square feet. And the same thing plays out for other products that have other active ingredients. Another example is Scott's Disease X that has one of our other excellent fungicides for large patch prevention, azoxystrobin. So when we look at Scott's Disease X, it has an effective product. or active ingredient in the product. It's used at 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet on a granule. And we compare that to the professional product with the same active ingredient, Heritage 50WP, and it goes out at 0.4 ounces per 1,000 square feet. So a lot less material, but it delivers 2 times the active ingredient as the homeowner marketed Scott's. If we, in many of our recommendations, recommend that we either combine or alternate these two products to prevent large patch, we get excellent results with our professional products. We can get good results from the homeowner products, but what it requires for that consumer product is listed down here on the bottom of the slide is 4 applications that come out to about $21.88 each of the fungus control for lawns to reach the minimum dose we found to be effective in our research, plus 2 applications of the Scott's Disease X at $23 each. When you add that all up, just per 1,000 square feet, you're looking at $134 of the homeowner products to be able to prevent large patch. Now, when you talk to your lawn care professional, many times it's going to be cheaper for them to do that application. It's going to be safer for the homeowner, particularly if they're not very experienced with application materials. And so this is a good example of where you can do it yourself, but sometimes it's better left to professionals for all except for the most dedicated and experienced homeowners to make the applications for instance, large patch prevention. As far as when we want to apply these fungicides, we don't want to apply them year round because there's no risk of large patch disease in June or July within the state of Florida. If we look at when we want to apply fungicides for large patch specifically, whether we're using the homeowner products, multiple applications, or whether we're scheduling with our professional to make 1 or 2 applications of Banner and Heritage, we need to time that before disease symptoms become apparent and when the pathogen is likely to become active. And what we know from our research in Central Florida, this is a graph for Marion County showing the soil temperatures as they start out in the early part of the year. They're low, they increase through the spring, they peak in summer, and then they go down in the fall. So you'll see that blue star there is kind of the upper limit of where we know large patch fungus becomes active. On average, 5-year average, that occurs about the beginning first week of October in Marion County or Alachua County, Florida. That's before we're going to see symptoms appear in our yards, but that's when we need to make the first application of our fungicide to prevent large patch from occurring. 1 application in the first week of October, 1 application in the first week of November to those areas, again, that are likely to develop disease where we've seen it before, where we know we have a susceptible host, can do an excellent job of preventing disease through the window when that disease is active and even into the spring of the year. If disease occurs after those 2, from my research, what we found it's been mild, it's quickly recovered, and additional fungicides are generally not needed beyond those 2 applications in the fall of the year. So when we can tailor our fungicide options to our particular disease where we know they're going to occur, we can really use these efficiently and do a great job of preventing disease without wasting product or exposing the environment to anything we don't need.
Very good. So what can you tell us about lethal viral necrosis and take-all root rot as far as how we manage those in the landscape?
Well, it's a great question, and sugarcane mosaic virus has really been a thorn in the side of turfgrass managers throughout the state of Florida for the last 10 years. And the way that we manage that disease and that problem that sugarcane mosaic virus causes is very dependent on the type of grass that we're growing. And in fact, it's one of the few examples where it's very specifically dependent on which variety of grass that we're growing. So when we look at sugarcane mosaic virus, that's the virus that can cause 2 different problems: mosaic, which is a mild disease of little management concern, and lethal viral necrosis, which kills Floritam grass in the state of Florida where it's present. So to know if we have Floritam, or as AJ mentioned, the genetically modified Floritam line by Scott's called Provista, if we have those 2 grasses and we have a sugarcane mosaic virus diagnosis, what has happened, the prognosis is not good. The prognosis is that those lawns will continue to suffer, will thin, and will eventually die and require renovation. So if we have a diagnostic sample confirmed sugarcane mosaic virus, and we know we have Floratam provista, or if we're seeing the lethal viral necrosis symptoms, how we manage this disease is through renovation and changing our grass in that particular lawn and landscape situation from Floratam or Provista to a different variety. We've tested several varieties within the state of Florida for their susceptibility to sugarcane mosaic virus. The two listed, Floratam and Provista, are the ones we know develop lethal viral necrosis and are problems. The others, like Citra Blue and Palmetto, do not die from sugarcane mosaic virus. They develop a mild mosaic disease that is easily overlooked by homeowners and doesn't cause any management concern. So knowing what grass you have is important for knowing how to deal with this problem for sugarcane mosaic virus, in particular for lethal viral necrosis specifically. And we can talk a little bit more about that sort of later on in the presentation, if you like. With take-all root rot, it's a little bit more subjective, and it depends on what is our limit, our tolerance for a poor aesthetic. How long can we wait for grass to recover? Because the larger the symptom patch, the more severe that symptom is in the patch that's affected, it's showing the yellowing, the thinning, the decline, the longer it's going to take for that lawn to recover back to a quality of turf grass that's acceptable. So generally speaking, when we have mild symptoms that are in the less than 6-inch patches and it's showing a yellowing early in the year, like now, a nutrient deficient symptom, we know it has take-all root rot. We can treat, we can slow the spread, and we can alter our agronomic inputs to try to reduce stress, as AJ and Adam both alluded to and talked about. That's very important for us with turf diseases as well. Reducing that stress reduces the severity and the likelihood of disease occurring. When we get to the point in June and July when we have severe decline, larger than 2 feet areas that are dead or dying, it's going to require an extended period of regrowth, which most homeowners are going to find unacceptable. So renovation is something to consider at that point. Renovation means ripping out dead and diseased turf, replacing it with areas that are with sod that's healthy in order to deal with that problem. And when you're looking at between 6 and 24 inches and you have this sort of unhealthy looking lawn, you're trying to decide whether to rip it out, replace it, or try to nurse it back to health. Some things you can look at are shade, traffic, weed pressure, and what are the HOA requirements or the expectation for your particular lawn. In some cases, we don't have the leeway to allow it to regrow slowly. We have to have a certain level of aesthetic, like it or not, due to our homeowner association restrictions. So those sort of factors, shade's going to slow and reduce the ability for recovery. Traffic is going to do the same, and weed pressure can be very difficult to deal with when we have diseased turf that's thinning and not competitive. So renovate in areas where we have severe disease, particularly with take-all root rot, where fungicides work very well for large patch, they do not work very well for take-all root rot. We can adjust our agronomic inputs. Occasionally, fungicides will give a positive effect and they'll slow the spread, but they won't cure diseased turf that's already showing a problem, like they will prevent large patch disease. So you see on the slide here that we have to consider certain aspects of the site, and there's Florida Friendly Landscape guidelines for that. What turf needs is full sun to partial shade. Most of the turf sites in Florida require irrigation. We can grow turf on just about any soil texture. It's very salt tolerant, has a pH range, but it does need that light. It does need that irrigation, water availability for it to be able to thrive. So when we deal with sites that are not suitable for turf grass, the old saying that's attributed to Albert Einstein is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If we've got a full shade lawn that's failed 2 or 3 times because of oak trees, root competition, shade, maybe turf is not the right solution for that particular site. And so considering that either through site modifications to change it or using a ground cover or turf grass alternative is a good first step when you're considering renovation. Of course, I like turf grass. I think it's beautiful to have a well-maintained turf lawn as part of a Florida-friendly landscape. But there are some cases and places, even in my lawn, there's no turf. I have other ground covers there just because there's too much shade and it's not the right spot. So when we do go through renovation, we talk about what is the scope of the renovation going to be? Can we just plug in individual pots of grass or sprigs of grass? And so we'll talk just a little bit about trying to determine the extent of renovation when we have different specific disease diagnoses. And the one that comes up most frequently here recently is with lethal viral necrosis. And the questions that I get are, how much of our community do we have to replace? We have lethal viral necrosis. Our turf looks terrible in certain areas. Do we have to replace the whole community? And the answer is no. There's no have-tos with dealing with this disease. There are some general guidelines that we try to relay based on our anecdotal observations of what's happened in the hundreds of communities that are affected by this disease. What's likely to happen and to occur is then compared with what your level of tolerance for a poor aesthetic is. And then that's a decision that's made at the individual homeowner level or the community level. And hopefully with the input and the research-based information that we can provide on what's likely to occur. So in general, when we're talking about Floritam sod and we have a lethal viral necrosis diagnosis and we have thinning and weed encroachment because of that diagnosis, we want to replace the Floritam sod in all the areas adjacent to that positive detection, because it's likely that in the next few months to 2 years that disease is going to spread and kill large areas of that turf that's connected, that's adjacent to where we're seeing lethal viral necrosis today. No strategy that we've employed in any of these areas that are affected and communities that are affected has stopped the lethal viral necrosis spread in its track. So it's continued to spread, sometimes slowly, sometimes more quickly. But what we can do is identify the areas that are the most affected, replace them with a grass that's not Floritam, and the decisions as to when and how much of the turf is replaced at one time is more of a logistical and a financial and a personal decision for those homeowners and HOAs that are dealing with this. And there are lots of different factors that we can consider, but we don't have a lot of epidemiological evidence to suggest that if you choose one, you're going to have a much faster epidemic or more of a problem than if you choose another route. In other words, replace it all quickly, wait and do piecemeal applications of new sod in areas that look poor. These don't generally affect the overall progression of this disease through a community once it's detected. So there are some financial, of course, there's some practical decision-making factors that we can use as far as what are our irrigation systems set up to do. And so those are some of the LVN specific questions and considerations. When we talk about fungal disease and take all root rot, we see a little bit different scenario play out because we have the opportunity to prevent spread, stop spread using fungicides, and then replace the areas that are the most severely affected. So similar sort of approach, but less likely for the end result with take-all root rot to be widespread death and loss of turf as compared to lethal viral necrosis. So as a minimum, we still want to replace the severely affected turf, sample the surrounding turf, and look not just how it looks on top, but look at those roots, pull the turf roots out, look to see if they're brown, discolored, mushy, etc. If we are going to change species of turf or a different variety even of grass that has a different leaf texture, we want to consider replacing a continuous lawn and following property lines just because of the way it's going to look when those two grow together and problems that can cause for different requirements as far as fertility, irrigation, and mowing height. If we're resodding with the same or similar variety, we want to look at irrigation zone boundaries. If we're not going to hand water that new sod, it will have to have irrigation applied, and those zones are all going to receive water. Sometimes that can cause problems if they're overwatering turf that's left behind. You'll get disease develop, or you're trying to get control. So those are steps that we can take and things to consider as we're moving forward. As far as other general steps for renovation, a soil test is really important. AJ talked about a soil test and what that can tell us. Non-selective herbicides are also important in a renovation process. And there are several available. Glyphosate is one that's still available and on the market, and there are alternatives. They reduce the weed pressure for that new sod that's being installed. It's not intended when we're talking about lethal viral necrosis or take all root rot to eliminate pathogens. The pathogens are going to remain present in the landscape. The non-selective herbicides are going to start us off with a clean slate, reduce the competition from those weeds, and help us give a higher chance for that sod to establish and create a nice lawn for us after that investment of money and effort to do so. So we want to, after we use a non-selective herbicide, remove dead sod and weeds to prevent organic layering. It might reduce pathogens, but that's not the overall goal of removing the dead tissue. It's an agronomic input. We want to reduce thatch. We want to give that turf, that new sod, the best chance. Contouring just means smoothing out lumps and areas, addressing drainage issues. That's the time to do it when we're renovating. These are steps that we generally recommend as part of our IFAS documents for renovating a St. Augustine or any other kind of lawn. pH modifications are rare where that's needed. We would apply lime, but only if the pH is lower than 5.5. And then in some cases where we have fill dirt, like we were talking about earlier, with very devoid of organic matter, peat incorporation or other organic matter incorporation or sulfur acidification can help bring that pH down and add some much needed organic matter for some of those fill type soils that are present. So where we've had perennial issues and we know the soil quality is poor, seek some support there, some information as to what we can do. It's going to vary site to site. Next steps, irrigation system audit. We've talked a little bit about irrigation, so I won't spend a lot of time there, but it's critical for us to have the water that sod needs for it to be successful to establish after a disease issue. And so visual inspection, pressure flow check, catch can tests that AJ talked about, critical for knowing our irrigation systems up to the job of helping support our turf. And there's a publication in IFAS with common problems of the different irrigation systems that are seen and how to address those that are available there on IFAS, our extension library as well. So if we look at what are some of the other common disease-related site prep questions that I get with lethal viral necrosis, with take-all root rot, these are ones that pop up fairly frequently. And they go something like, should I remove the soil to get rid of the pathogen in my landscape? And the answer there is always no. We don't remove soil. It's not going to help in reducing pathogen. Pathogen is going to be present below where we remove soil. It's going to be present in surrounding areas. It's going to be moved in with the new healthy sod. And so removing soil is not something that we recommend. It can cause layering of different soil types and organic matters, which can cause severe drainage issues and water problems that can lead to disease and other problems later on. Another question that I get is, why do I have to remove all of this dead sod after I spray it out? Company X says he'll just put the sod right over the dead turf. Can I do that? Sure, you can do that, but it's not going to work very well. Organic layering, we've seen that many times in our samples where we'll have a dead sod layer under the soil of the turf that's struggling. That can give problems with, again, drainage and water management. It can give insect pests and pathogens a place to refuge, to live and survive, and cause a lot of problems with the new sod that's installed. So it's a shortcut that we don't generally recommend. If we have LVN in our Floratam and we want to replace it, do we have to use sod, or can we plug or use pots of grass, sprigs of grass to introduce a new variety that won't die from LVN? And theoretically, that should work. The practical answer has been no. The results have been unsatisfactory. When we try to do that, the grass takes too long to grow. It doesn't compete well with the weeds and the remaining Floratam that's present, and we're not able to establish a healthy, aesthetically pleasing lawn in the amount of time that's generally allowed. If you have a lot of time and you don't mind using herbicides to try to prevent that, it is something that can be done. It doesn't usually work out well for the particular homeowner. Is there something that I can spray or treat the soil with after the turf has died before installing the new sod to kill the pathogen? Do I have to spray something on the soil? And the answer is no. We don't spray anything on the soil prior to installation of sod. That's a no-no. We don't want to do it. It's not going to have the intended effect. We can use fungicides at the time of sod installation. We want to wait until that sod is installed. If we know we've had take-all root rot in the past, applying a fungicide at the time of sod installation, and 4 weeks later has been one of the most effective uses of fungicides in preventing that new sod from failing a second time. It won't stop disease that's already started to occur, but it can help prevent takeoff from ruining sod that's been installed in an area where takeoff has occurred before. As far as moving on in the renovation steps, in particular with lethal viral necrosis, issues have come up that we've never even considered before about sourcing sod. And recently, these issues have involved sod products marketed under different names that have contained a large amount of Floratam sod. Floratam is a great grass for areas that don't have lethal viral necrosis. It's still one of the industry standards, one that's produced by a lot of sod farms in the state, and it has some very positive attributes that we've already talked about. Unfortunately, when we put Floratam sod back in an LVN affected community, that sod fails within a year to two after installation, much more quickly than it takes the disease to establish the first time. So that's not a problem if we're purchasing something other than Floratam, unless what we purchase accidentally or inadvertently contains a majority of Floratam in that sod product. And that's what we found has happened with varieties that are not protected through patent and that don't have any sort of licensing agreement for their names. For instance, bitter blue is an old variety of St. Augustine grass that can work very well for an LVN replacement. Unfortunately, we found through research and genetic testing that many of the sod products that are on the market contain Floratam, up to 100% Floratam in those bitter blue sod products. And when that occurs, that sod will fail, even though it was purchased and was intended to be something different. If it's Floratam, it will die. And so Citra Blue and Palmetto are licensed products that are sold and managed by Sod Solutions as their licensed management company. Different producers produce those, but where they're licensed, and one of those two varieties, we've seen the most consistent genetic purity of those particular sod products. Not a guarantee, but it has been the most consistent. When we purchase Palmetto or Citra Blue, that's what we get, and those don't die from lethal viral necrosis. Most problems that we've seen have come through third-party wholesalers who get grass from a sod farm, market that direct to homeowners or to installers through a third party in a wholesale fashion. In that case, a lot of times information gets confused, and what's sold as something like shade grass or under different names turns out to be Floratam, our most common variety.
Well, thank you for that. Can we kind of switch over and talk about zoysia grass a little bit and what diseases you find issues with zoysia grass most commonly?
Yeah, sure thing. Zoysia is a real challenge for us, particularly this time of the year. We get a lot of samples of zoysia grass, and you'll see at the very top of this chart our most common diagnosis on those samples. No pathogen found. This time of year, zoysia grass goes through a little bit of a funk where it just starts to brown out. It thins. Most homeowners are reporting that the turf is receiving adequate irrigation. Occasionally, we'll find diseases and pathogens on those samples like curvularia or bipolaris that can cause leaf spots. Take-all root rot is our most common disease that we diagnose on zoysia grass, and it can occur. But this time of year, what we see is zoysia grass lawns browning out, thinning, that don't have a substantial amount of take-all root rot or these other diseases. And there are some nematode issues that can occur around this time of year when we have some drought stress before regular rains. And there are some other issues I think that we don't fully understand with zoysia as far as why that happens. Had some contact from folks down in the villages last week. Lots of areas looking poor, having thinning and browning issues with zoysia. And my guess is that if I received additional samples of those this year, there'd still be no pathogen present in those. So what we can do is look at what are our agronomic inputs, what are the irrigation setup and timing, and try to address all of those agronomic inputs to prevent that stress from occurring and that decline in turf. Send the sample in when we get the no pathogen found. It does indicate that we can direct our attentions more towards those agronomic inputs, towards that nematode assay lab sample, or trying to identify if there are insect or other arthropod pests present. But as far as diseases go, we see a lot of overlap with zoysia. Large patch is a major issue for us in zoysia. Take-all root rot is a major issue. And then in addition to those, we have a different leaf spot called curvularia leaf spot or bipolaris leaf spot that can also cause problems for us, specifically on our zoysia grass lawns. And we do see some additional issues down here in the lower part of the graph, like dollar spot that we don't typically see with our St. Augustine or Bahia grass lawns that are specific to zoysia grass and that generally can be managed, again, with agronomic inputs and tweaking our mowing height, our fertilizer application and timing, and our irrigation frequency, and occasionally the use of a fungicide as well.
So what do we do? What's the prognosis with with our zoysia grass if we do have take all root rot?
Yeah, it's very similar to what we would see with zoysia with St. Augustine grass. Zoysia grass has, I think, a little bit less of a recuperative potential, particularly in shady areas than our St. Augustine, even meaning that we have a smaller window of time to treat or to prevent spread before renovation is going to be required or the desirable outcome for renovating a particular area that has disease. Uh, Zoysia grass tends to be pretty traffic tolerant. Once that traffic causes damage, though, it's slow to recuperate. Does have good shade tolerance overall, but again, the shade can reduce its ability to recuperate from disease once it occurs. So, knowing where take all root rot occurs, catching it early, the occasional use of fungicide to prevent spread or some symptoms from becoming severe can be appropriate things to do for take all root rot and zoysia grass, much like we see with St. Augustine grass as well.
All right. We're running a little short on time, but I want to finish up. What are some of the common reasons for sod to fail?
We can look at a lot of different reasons why sod might fail besides disease, and disease can be one of those as well in there. But when we look at non-disease specific plant stresses, kind of the top of the list or irrigation, and this was talked about, so I won't spend a lot of time there as far as over irrigation causing problems, under irrigation. When we have disease, the rules change a little bit as far as what we need to do as far as irrigation. If we have a root rot, we don't want to apply deep and infrequent irrigation necessarily. That irrigation is going to quickly move past where the functional roots are. And so we do have to change our irrigation amounts and our timings a little bit to nurse turf along that's showing this. But what we want to do is, like was mentioned earlier, give the turf water when it shows drought stress, when it needs that water, and only when it needs that water. And that will help to reduce the likelihood that the conditions in the soil will be moist, conducive to fungal disease and growth of the pathogen. Mowing height frequency already talked about. It's important for us to use the correct height. It's important for us not to allow the turf to get too high before we mow because that scalps those growing points and causes thinning and problems. Fertilizers are great for turf. They can also cause problems when they're applied the wrong time or at the wrong rates. So those have been talked about as well. Herbicides, insecticides, fungicides all have the potential to do good things for us. They can all potentially cause problems as well. So it should be used, as we've talked about today, judiciously when warranted and using the most effective and least impact products that we have available. When we look at reasons why sod can fail as far as floratam and lethal viral necrosis in particular, the most common reason why sod fails is when floratam is put back into an LVN affected lawn. So this disease started in South Florida just this last year. We found it in Jacksonville area and Ponte Vedra area. So it's spread throughout the southern part of the state. It's not in every community within these areas and counties that are affected, but where it occurs, it's important for us to get a diagnosis, to know it's present, and then to switch to something other than floratam or Provista. And this has been critical because of the number of failures of lawns that have occurred where folks have made an outlay of cash, put good floratam sod into these communities that are affected, only to have it fail the next year because of this viral disease. So that's a common reason and important one that we can overlook and avoid.
Terrific. Any other reasons, that people often fail with their yard?
Well, back in 2018 and 2022, we had low temperature injury that came in, and we had a lot of samples with no pathogen found or with mild infestations of disease that were due to a low temperature injury. This past year was very mild. We didn't see that, but low temperature injury on newly installed sod, particularly Floratam or other varieties that are sensitive to low temperatures, has been one of the reasons that we've seen sod fail. In addition to low temperature, we can have desiccation that occurs when we have a particularly dry winter period if the irrigation system is not up to snuff. So drouthy, windy conditions can really tax irrigation systems to the point where we can't get enough water on new sod in the fall of the year. And in some of these occasions in spring, like spring 2019, when it was just very dry. And so adjusting the timing of sod installation, generally spring is a little bit better time once we start to see regular rainfalls and we have better growth potential for that turf, that sod to back down. We can install sod year round in South Florida. It's a better idea in North Florida to install that sod in the spring rather than the fall when we have that period of time with little recuperative potential, growth potential in the turf, and drouthy, stressful conditions.
Fantastic, Phil. Thank you so much. You covered
Thank
a
you.
wealth of topics, and it's you've given us so much great information. With that, I'd like to invite back AJ and Adam, and we've got a few questions that have come up. AJ, let's see, is AJ popping up?
Yep.
There
Yep.
you come. Good. AJ, how can you tell what turf grass selection you have?
That's a good question. We're currently working on an EDIS document that'll go over kind of stepwise what to look for. Um, there are some other resources that I have, so we're trying to get them out in the public. So right now, I believe the best option would be to contact myself or Dr. Kenworthy or Dr. Unruh would probably be the best option, but there are some resources out there, and we should have a few more from UF coming up.
Okay, great. And AJ, where can you buy some of those newer grass selections that you were talking about?
So the best way to find a sod farm that produces them would be actually to go to the Turfgrass Producers of Florida website, and you can go look at what variety you're looking for, click on it, and then it will give you a list of all the sod farms that are actually producing them. And then from there, you can contact them for a quote.
Okay, great. Adam, quick question for you. Does lighting at night encourage or discourage any insect pests?
Yes. So yeah, so a lot of nocturnal insects are attracted to lights that are left on at night. It's very species specific, but in general, any moth species is going to be attracted to light at night. So if you think about in terms of turfgrass pests, fall armyworms, sodweb worms, but other nocturnal turfgrass insects that are attracted to light would be mole crickets. So mole crickets are very attracted to light at night. Generally speaking, leaving lights on at night is not great for wildlife. It disrupts a lot of interactions with predatory and parasitic insects. Lots of beneficial insects get disrupted by lights at night. So it can be a good IPM tactic to leave lights off when possible, but also a good thing to do for nature in general.
Fantastic. Thank you. AJ, another question for you. Thoughts on Bermuda grass? We didn't talk about Bermuda, but um, are there, traditionally Bermuda has been considered a higher maintenance turf. Um, what's on the horizon, or what are your thoughts?
By and large, they're still considered high maintenance. So real high end landscapes might try to use them, but it's typically aimed for sports turf and golf courses. I know there is a push to do some more research on them in residential areas, especially for communities that don't have any access to irrigation or don't want to irrigate. Bermuda grass is probably our most drought tolerance grass, but to make it look like a lawn that people actually would want does require a lot of inputs right now.
All right. Phil, quick question for you. Thoughts on managing gray leaf spot on homeowners' new sod?
Yeah, so with new sod, fungicides are an option. Some of the same fungicides that we can apply to new sod to protect from take-all root rot are also going to give us some protection from gray leaf spot. In general, though, after the sod is established, if we're careful about our nitrogen inputs, by reducing nitrogen, not over applying nitrogen, we can increase the resistance of that grass, particularly if it's Floratam or Citra Blue, one of the newer, more resistant grasses. Um, we can really control it by limiting nitrogen fertility, limiting irrigation where necessary, and during periods of time when it won't extend a leaf wetness period, are things that we can do to reduce the severity of gray leaf spot. As far as particular fungicides at the time of sod installation, the Banner that I mentioned, the Heritage that I mentioned, and then there's a product called Headway, which is a combination of those two in one product that's popular among our lawn professionals in the state of Florida for at this time of sod installation and 1 month later applications. That's a Syngenta product, but there's also an InView product called Armada, which is similar and that does a nice job, and several many others on the market as well. So fungicides can help in that particular new sod installation situation, but there's some agronomic inputs that we can adjust as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Adam, what pathogens thrive in droughty type conditions? Or I guess what insects, sorry, my apologies.
All right. I was about to say, I can't tell you anything about pathogens. So in droughty conditions, we tend to think about our sap feeding insects that are going to take advantage of that the most. But kind of like I was mentioning earlier, they like drought stressed plants, but only when those plants get flushes of water. So most of the time, they're not going to thrive when there's really, really dry conditions. Um, there are some things like spider mites that kind of show up in really dry conditions, but in turfgrass systems, that's not a really common issue that we run into. But our sap feeding pests like chinch bugs, spittle bugs, mealy bugs, those are going to be the ones that we generally think of.
Claire, I've been dominating asking questions. Did you have any questions that you would want to ask the group?
No, you're doing a great job, Tom. And just to remind everybody, thank you for staying on. This has been like really informative. There will be a recording if you want to go back and re-listen to some of this. It'll be on our website in about a week. We usually get it up within a week.
Good. I'll ask the panel this question. I know how I would answer it, but I'd love to hear y'all's answers. What preventive pesticides do you recommend?
That's kind of a loaded question, but
Uh-huh.
for me, it really depends on your target pest, what you're trying to prevent. In general, I wouldn't recommend preventing anything unless you know what you're preventing. Uh, uh, in terms of insects, acelepryn or the active ingredient in that is chlorantraniliprole. For homeowners, over-the-counter products, there's a product called Grub X that has the same active ingredient. That's probably our most effective preventive insecticide that's also shown to be safe for a lot of non-target organisms. So it's very IPM compatible. And it's primarily effective at preventing caterpillar pests and beetle pests like white grubs or things like bill bugs. But that's probably my go-to number one preventive product.
Okay. And, normally the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program doesn't ever recommend, we, as you say, go with IPM, and we normally like to monitor our scout our landscape and use pesticides as a last resort, but there are uses for them. And Phil or AJ, either one of you want to discuss that topic at all?
One thing, Phil, one thing I would say, preventive can also be like when you detect a very early stage infestation and you don't have like widespread damage yet. That can be another preventive situation, which is really ideal. Um, and the same would apply.
Super.
Yeah, that's sort of along the lines of the point I was going to make is that preventive across an area of healthy turf doesn't make any sense where we know we haven't had any problems before. We wouldn't want to do that and waste the product when we don't need it. Preventive for large patch in an area that's poorly drained, that we can't correct that drainage, where we know disease has occurred, and where that damage that occurs has lasted for months and caused other issues. That's where a preventive application can make sense. And so a question that I get is, how long do I have to do that? Well, make it for the first year, make it for the second year. Maybe the third year, you wait and see if the symptom comes back or if it's required as you try to incorporate some of the agronomic inputs and changes into that system as well. So preventive with disease is important, but we don't want to go wide, full scale, wall to wall preventive if we don't have a good reason to suspect disease is likely to occur and cause damage that's significant.
One question that came up earlier was sod webworms on recently laid sod. And that's a case where preventive applications of something like acelepryn are really useful because we know freshly laid sod is like a little magnet for caterpillar outbreaks. If it's the time of year when caterpillars are active. So if it's like May to September and you put new sod down, preventive applications can be really helpful.
Okay. AJ, some management strategies to reduce turf stress and potential pest outbreaks.
I think it's basically what I talked about and what kind of everyone's touched on. It's proper irrigation, proper water management, proper nutrition, correct mowing heights. So anything we can do kind of cultural practice wise to kind of make the system better overall. But those kind of three are the easiest ones that we can manage, that kind of sets us up for success.
Very good. I don't know if y'all had a chance to monitor the chat at all or anything, but a lot of great comments, people saying, so much great information and one of the best presentations on the topic they've ever heard. Thank you guys so much for taking the time and working with us on this new format that we had with our webinar. Claire, thank you so much for sharing this with me. And I do want to remind everyone that we do have our next webinar is coming up for June 11th at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, and that's Dr. Faith Oy talking about IPM. So it'll kind of continue along with this pest management topic that we've touched on a lot today. So everybody, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Take care.